I'm Kaiden, and I'm going to attempt to explain how I did this speed paint. Here I'm just kind of doing the sort of lines for the sketch. I didn't record the sketch, but it's basically just a cleaner sketch that's semi-transparent. And then I'm coloring it in, and I don't know, this isn't particularly special. It's just doing flat coloring like you do for most art. I didn't really have a Firestar design in mind when I was drawing this. I just got a whole bunch of notifications on my Twitter feed that it was the 15th anniversary of Warriors, and I was like, oh my god, I really want to draw a thing for that. And so I was pretty much trying to do it as fast as I could. And, you know, just messing around till things looked okay. Here I colored the liner and put it on Lumion Shade. I colored it with like a dark red color, and therefore it kind of creates this colored line art thing, which makes painting easier in the end. And then I kind of wanted to do a blurred forest type thing, but I didn't really know how. I started out trying to do like normal forest and then blurring it in the end, and then I was like, you know what, I'll just try painting with the airbrush so it looks blurred at first, and, you know, I was just kind of messing around a whole bunch with it, and, you know, and trying to see what worked and what didn't. So when I start shading on Firestar, it's basically like, just doing cell shading in any other piece. I try to think of the shapes on his face and all that stuff. Use a green color since the forest is green. And then I started changing the color for the fur on his chest and ears to make it look more like it matched and all that stuff instead of being green. And then I color in the highlighted places with a yellow overlay to make it look like the sun is hitting them and all that stuff. And then I messed around with the background colors more and all that stuff. Just doing things. Oh, and then I tried to move the background but realized that I hadn't colored it under Firestar, which is something that I usually do, so I can move the background, but whatever. In the end, I decided that going this route wasn't really working, and luckily was able to undo all the work I did and get back to where I started with the background. And here I'm just adding some more darker shadows on Firestar to make to give more depth and everything, and highlights in the background and all that. And yeah, and then I decided his ear really needed to be in the highlights, and, you know, adding more highlights and all that stuff, and fixing the main shading, seeing how it works in different ways. And then, so here I'm doing bounce highlights, which are, it's like light that comes from like different areas where there would be shadow and stuff. It just makes everything look more 3D and interesting than if you would just do normal shading. And so, like, ever since I learned about it, it's just been something I've kind of done. Here I'm starting underpainting, which is where basically I start cleaning up the shadows and everything, doing blending, which is kind of the same sort of thing that I do when I start overpainting, except here I'm doing it under the lines so that I don't have to worry about like bleeding into the background yet, but I can still like refine things so I don't have to do it all on the final layer. And I'm just picking colors from, you know, what's around the area already, and, you know, making things look more 3D, adding some fur texture, adding, you know, extra shadows, and highlights and stuff. You know, it's like the pre-painting phase and all that. But I'm not super clean on it. I just want to, you know, get the basic idea down, so that, because in the end I do refine it a lot more when I get to the final painting stage. But yeah, I you know, I'm doing much darker colors than I originally had for the shading because I'm grabbing from the colored lines and all that stuff. And you know, just doing some minor edits here and checking stuff and all that. Yeah. So then I'd move into Photoshop so I can start doing final color messing with the background, because before I do my final overpainting, I have to make sure that the background's completely how I want it, because when I do overpainting, I basically erase lines by painting with the background color. And I went into Photoshop because it has better layer effects so that I could change the colors easier. And now I'm going back into Psy to start painting after I turn Firestar more orange and turn the background a little bit more colors. And so when I start overpainting, I'm just grabbing colors from the background like I'd normally do, and painting over the lines and shading, blending shading, making the colors more blocked in, painting over the lines that are still there, or making the lines that I need, like the lines for the eyes, more actually there. And I decided to do blue for his pupils instead of black because it just looked a little bit more interesting. And, I started blending all the colors in his eyes and blending the bridge of his nose and adding more colors into his pupils and all of that stuff. Just using more of the line colors and defining shapes while attempting to erase, the lines that I didn't want, just because, I like doing paintings that are, mostly semi-lineless. And one of the reasons I do that is actually because I just don't like doing line art. Like, it's really annoying for me. Even though these paintings usually take like a really long time. Surprisingly, this one only took 3 hours, but like usually they take a really long time. But I enjoy the process way more than I enjoy it when I'm line arting, so it happens to be my main art style. Yeah, but this is just a whole lot of going over stuff, and I'm mostly using either a normal round brush with no special properties, or this kind of square brush that has some nice blending properties, and also if I use it right, it also creates kind of a nice fur texture, even though it's not like completely made for fur or anything. And yeah, so just this long, tedious process of refining and getting rid of all the lines and making sure the body shape is right. His shoulders, well, first off, I don't really think I paid much attention to the anatomy of his shoulders there. And I think this was the first time I learned how to do that kind of inside his ear texture, and I kind of wish I had done it on all my other paintings that I did, but oh well. Yeah, I don't know how much I have to say about this. Other than when you do fur texturing, starting out with the dark color and then painting over it with the light color usually makes it better instead of drawing around with the dark and all that stuff. And here I'm doing eye highlights and stuff, and I like using different colors. As you can see, the shadows for his eyes are more bluish if I zoom in, and then the highlights are more yellow-green. Here I'm just doing the watercolor to make the blur for the background different. And then I'm messing with doing some things in the front. I wanted to have some bushes in the foreground just because it looked kind of weird and boring without anything. And I'm still kind of iffy with plants compared to some people. They're kind of hard. And I had to mess around a lot with this one, both the positioning and with the leaves in the first place. I don't have very many special brushes on Psy, so besides not being that experienced with leaf things, I also don't have anything special to make them look better than they would normally be. But it's kind of similar with fur, where you start with a darker base and then do lighter things on top of it, and all that. So I just messed with it for a while, and then I'm doing details on top of stuff. I added the blue highlights on Firestar, and then I'm adding more highlights in his eyes, and messing around with the highlights on the trees and all that, and then I was trying to mess around more because it looked like the foreground trees were kind of blending in too much with the background. And I like doing sun highlights and all that stuff. And so messing around, I usually use the watercolor brush or the blur brush for that, and it takes a little bit for me to get the angle exactly right. And I was erasing some places on Firestar because I was making him look too light, and then blurring it. And then I tried to do whiskers, but it didn't work. And made his eyes look kind of different, and added more bounce highlights just to make it look even more 3D and all that stuff. And more normal highlights and all that for effect, moving the bushes a little again, and just getting it ready for the final edits in Photoshop and all that stuff. Yeah. So once I got it all ready, I moved it to Photoshop to do final color editings. I worked with the color balance and, just mess around with the midtones and highlights, adding more red, doing more blue and all that stuff. And then I'll do these just color blurs and go through all the layer effects and see what looks nice. One of the other things I do is this mass of different colors and just messing around until something looks better. I'm making everything, kind of blend together better. And all that stuff, just because I kind of think it looks nice than what I originally get with just my first pass at Psy. But it's just a lot of messing around, slapping colors everywhere and all that stuff. And then I moved it back into Psy to do some very final edits, just fixing some lines, adding some other colors, and cropping it. And then, I'm done. There's the final Firestar. Hope you enjoyed!